All right, what's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us on this week's Cheeky Midweeky. We are here with a certified badass and person that, listen, I'll just let you go ahead and introduce yourself. That's a good enough of a hook. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am Brianna Strecker. Currently reside with the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg. I just completed Army Ranger School, and I just got my platoon, and I'm currently a first lieutenant. I previously was a Division I softball coach at Army West Point, and prior to that, I coached at Tufts University, where we won a national championship. And prior to that, I was a coach and athlete at Bridgewater State University.
All right, we're at Bridgewater State, Massachusetts. All right, stand up, Massachusetts. Go ahead, y'all can stand up right now. Lot to unpack there. So let's start with any of our listeners out there that are like, okay, I'm struggling with this transition from athlete to coach. You said you won national championships as a coach, so clearly you had success. What were the struggles? And then what was the best, easiest part of transitioning from athlete to coach?
I think for me personally, when I left, as an athlete and started coaching, I think when you're young, it's really hard because you're still close with the athletes, and then you also are still supposed to hold that role of, having like subordinates, and you want to be liked, and you don't want to separate your friendships and your professional relationships. I think that's definitely a struggle. If you coach where you played, that's always a struggle. And I think any new coach that comes in, even if you left where you played for, you want the buy-in from the athletes. So you kind of come in young and you really only know what you were coached in. I think trying to grasp that there is so many different ways to skin a cat and so many different ways to do things, and there's so much to learn as a young coach, that everything that you were taught is not everything that there is to know. And then portraying that to people that were just once your peers and you being young in the field is definitely a struggle. And I think getting away from the school you coach for is 100% the right answer. I think that was really hard for me when I left Bridgewater State to go somewhere else. I was so connected to the culture there and the people there that I was kind of a big baby about it, and I didn't really want to go. But I had a great opportunity, and I took it, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I had a leader that helped me grow in that field. She put me in a lot of uncomfortable situations. She sent me to a lot of conferences. She helped me lead a lot of different camps and clinics, and she put me in positions to be successful. And I was so grateful for that. And I think I was uncomfortable most of the time. And that is exactly, I think, why I ended up being successful in the coaching field. I don't think you get anywhere when you kind of stay in your comfort zone. So, yeah, I don't know if that answer, I don't remember the full question, but I hope that answers kind of.
No, you're good. That answered it. But my follow-up to that would be, okay, that makes sense. Like getting away from where you played, it's easier to coach them. But what about the fact that, okay, let's say these positions, they're low level, they're low paying. So oftentimes if you went to school there, finding somewhere to live, it's a little bit more manageable. So to our listener out there, that's like, okay, great advice, but I still have to be here, or I'm still here. How do you recommend separating the two to do the best job at that place?
I would say find as many mentors and find as many people like that are out there who are wanting to grow. Just because you're coaching softball does not mean you shouldn't know about what the basketball team, the volleyball team, what your strength staff is doing, what your athletic trainers are doing, but like have a hand in every piece of the puzzle, because at the end of the day, you might coach the softball team, but you are the connecting factor between your strength coaches, your athletic trainers, their teachers. You can learn so much with what's right there. So maybe you don't have the money to go to conferences, and maybe you don't have the money to go, to get all the books and, listen to all the podcasts, but you do have the resources and the people around you who have years of experience. And I think trying to do as much possible networking as you can, and email people. Like, I can't tell you how many emails I sent out to other coaches, or asking, can I come watch a practice, or like, do you have any templates of things, to like how you structured your catchers, this specific thing, but like use the people around you. And most people in this field want to help, like 100% get excited to help other people grow. And that's why we are in this field, in this profession. So I think building those relationships is one of the most important things that you can do.
Let's stay there and talk about that coaching career. Hearing you say that, like, look, learn, grow, be a coach. Talk about it in your perspective, the field of coaching where, you didn't need a degree in coaching to be a coach. Coaches don't need a degree in coaching. How do coaches, support staffs, like, talk about that fine line and dichotomy where you need, as a strength coach, you need certifications, need CEUs, all that stuff. You sound like you take the time to invest yourself in that. To any of our listeners that maybe have a coach out there that doesn't do that, isn't doing what you recommended, how would you recommend them as a strength and conditioning coach to get through to their coaching staff to get that end result of helping your athletes?
Yeah, I think, and I kind of actually, I faced this a little bit when I first got to Tufts. I think they weren't as invested in the strength and conditioning program. And I personally, so I love the field of strength and conditioning. I'm a big supporter. Even now, like H2F, I think and that's the part of them. I know we'll get to that, but there's definitely a struggle in implementation. I'm a huge supporter and I'm a huge fan, because I love what strength coaches are meant to help you. There's science, there's data. Getting people prepared is 100% the best outcome. It's injury prevention. It is like getting the most out of your athletes. And I think presenting the data is a huge piece of that. And like just trying to show people where you're like, okay, we can do, sprints every single day to improve getting out of the box and getting to first base. But we're only going to reach a certain point until we start training, to train to get better at that specific event. And that's where the strength coaches come in, strength and conditioning coaches. And I think trying to present that, this is where they win, or this is where they come from, and this is the knowledge they have. And I might be an expert on how to swing a bat, but I'm not an expert on how to get this kid to, have the extra hip drive in her pitch, or how do I get her more explosive out of the box, or whatever the case is. That's for the strength and conditioning coaches. And I think when you come with the data, when you come, by building the relationship between the only way, great cultures are cultures where your coaches are okay taking the expertise of others who have education in those specific departments, because that's why you're there ultimately. And you put those pieces together and you collaborate. And I know, having those meetings with your strength and conditioning coaches, your athletic trainers, your professors, your at West Point TAC officers, implement, if everybody's not bought in and everybody's not on the same page, your team culture is not together. And I think that is important, that relationship, that buy-in, explaining why they're important, explaining the differences they can make. I think that is the only way to try to bridge that gap. So you either want to be successful at the end of the day, or you don't. You want to be stubborn and stuff the day before.
Amen to that. I mean, shit. We could wrap right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so our viewers can see, you're clearly in uniform, and you talked about the transition. So you were at Army, you were at West Point. You're now, in our military. So again, thank you for your service, first of all. But what drove that? Like, I mean, again, maybe we have some listeners that are considering it or did it. We had a coach on before that was in the service and now is a strength coach. Actually was a strength coach, left, and then to go to the military, was a Green Beret, and then came back into coaching. So, there is a demographic that does that. You're speaking to that demographic right now. What was the driving factor for you? And ultimately, what would be some advice that you'd give any of those people?
Yeah. I love leader. I'm just super passionate about leadership. I think that is the way to describe like what drives me. And softball was my avenue for that for a very long time. And I think when I got to West Point, for anybody that's ever been there, it is like it sells itself in terms of just culture and atmosphere, and it's one of the most incredible places. And I don't think I have never felt more grateful to be anywhere than to have a job coaching the sport I love at one of the most like incredible institutions in the country. So I fell in love with the process. I fell in love with recruiting athletes to not only just compete, but also like there was this life after, and they were going to go do something so honorable. And I got really bought into it. I would attend their classes. I would be out at their summer trainings. I was like very bought into what it meant for them to, because Division I athletes, it is their life. Their sport is their life, day in and day out. They're in the strength and conditioning, like they're in the strength room every single day. They're at conditioning practice. They're at, getting tutored, and then they're, back out at practice for specific positions. And it's like, you're literally lining up every single hour of their day. And then these guys have all that plus military training, and the sacrifices they were making is just incredible. And I had this like pull to just, when I found out that I could possibly be a part of this, I was like, I have to see if this is for me or not. And coaching, and one of my mentors described it to me as, he was like, coaching, being an infantry officer and coaching a college sport are very similar. Like as a officer in the Army, you have a platoon of people, and you kind of have to figure out where and who is best at what position. Like who's your best squad leader? Who's your best team leader? Where do you want them? Like who's going to be best on your assault line? Who's going to be best in your support by fire? And all these crazy things. And it's like, okay, who's my best for shortstop right now? Who do I want on the mound for this game? And like, what is my batting lineup? They're all like, it's all like coaching and mentoring every single day. And I knew that I wasn't leaving coaching. I just knew that I was trying to take my leadership, my passion for leadership to a different level. And so I was like, I will never know if I don't try. And so I'm just going to go all in, and I'm going to go to officer candidate school, and I'm going to give this thing a try and see if I can continue to grow. Cause I'm very big on like building my leadership abilities, growing in that department, and let's see where else I can take this, and like, what avenues will it open up for me? So.
Oh, I mean, elaborate for our list. Like, what did that look like? So you jumped in full, like, go ahead, tell your story. This is your platform. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Come on.
Okay. So then once I made this decision, I applied to officer candidate school. I got in. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make in my life, because coaching, I think there is no other better job in the world. Like I had everything I could have ever wanted. And I had no reason to leave, but I just knew that like I would have a regret of not trying if I didn't. So I go to officer candidate school, which actually ended up, I stopped coaching at West Point in September of 2019, and October of 2019 I was at basic training. So I had to go to regular basic training like every enlisted soldier in the Army, and I went through basic training, which was 13 weeks, I believe. And then I graduated from there, and I actually ended up I still didn't know what I wanted to branch, by the way. And a lot of my drill sergeants told me, oh, you got to go infantry. And I wasn't really sure what that meant, or really, didn't really know a lot about the military at the time. And then I was like, okay, cool. And so then I went from there, and I ended up getting an award at basic training. I was like selected as soldier of the cycle. Yep. And that was exciting. And then I went to officer candidate school, and there was a 10-week course that basically prepares you to be an officer in the Army. And the whole time you're competing for what branch you're going to get. So you're ranked amongst your classmates on how well you perform during school. And then there's like an order of merit list, and there's only a certain amount of slots in each branch. And while I was there, a lot of my cadre were like, oh, I think you do great in the infantry and all this stuff. And I ended up getting an award there for like a physical fitness award or something like that. And which the infantry is very physically based. So that's kind of how everything was lining up for me. And it's also competitive, and I put it at the top of my list, and I got it. And then I went to a 19-week course for infantry training specifically. So it's 14 weeks of that course is spent in the woods. 14 of the 19 weeks is spent in the woods, basically learning how to perform infantry tactics. And then from there, I graduated. I ended up coming to Bragg, going through their pre-ranger course. And once I finished the pre-ranger course, I was sent to ranger school. And then I spent more days than I wanted to, but I think it was like 70 days, 78 days or something like that at ranger school. And then I ended up graduating ranger school as like the 113th female to graduate. And now I'm back here at Bragg.
I mean, so again, anybody that's listening, I started this podcast off by saying this fucking certified badass on this podcast. And like, you go ahead and play that back. Like, yeah, I was not wrong.
Thanks.
No, like you should be proud of that. I'd be proud of that. I mean, we just had a guest on today that was talking about some other accomplishments that she had. And I was like, fuck, you should be proud as hell of that. Like, I'd be proud as hell. One of the things that I kept writing down as you were talking is leadership. And this was softball was your avenue for leadership. And now this is your avenue for leadership. I'm not going to talk about my opinions on leadership and how I think coaches in sport can misinterpret military leadership, but let's just start off with what you personally believe the word leadership means, and what does it look like for you?
I think it comes in a lot of different forms. But I believe for me personally, and I think it's changed for me over time as well, but leadership is not, I don't think it's something that you like I don't know that it's like tangible. Leadership is something that you like exude every single day, in my opinion. I believe that you walk, like the way you walk, the way you talk, like it is leadership. Your ability to help people is leadership. Your ability to impact others is leadership. I believe that every single day, whether they're somebody that you literally get to mentor, like from morning to evening on a daily basis, or somebody that you are passing by in the park, like you either have an opportunity for leadership or you don't. And it's basically your integrity and the way that you carry yourself. But ultimately, like your ability to impact others for the better, the ability to change their lives, the ability to push them, the ability to help them grow, the ability to change and create culture. I think it comes in just so many different facets. It's one of the most dynamic, and I think one of the most impactful things that we have as individuals. And you don't see it. There's so much bad leadership, and that's the other thing is like throughout all this, like I have taken something away from every leader that I've ever had, good or bad. I know what I don't ever want to emulate, and I know what I want to give to the people that I'm given the opportunity to lead. And I have to remind myself, I think as leaders, we get lost all the time. Obviously, we all have our own things, our own life, but we have to remember that, like, as leaders, when we're put in those positions and someone has allowed you to lead, like, you owe it to not only yourself, but to those individuals to make sure that you are doing the right thing and being a better person for them and for yourself every day. So,
What is bad leadership to you? You mentioned that.
I believe bad leadership is, I think it comes in a lot of different avenues, but being selfish and or a lack of integrity to me, it's very obvious when you have leaders who were placed somewhere or are put in a position and they don't want to be there. You are a culture killer. And I think that they don't understand that it's not about them, but there is people, whether you want to be in your leadership role or not, there are people that depend on you and people whose like lives depend on what you bring to the table every day. I truthfully believe that so many people never look at themselves and think like, how did I impact somebody else today? And like, that is bad leadership. Not being aware of the fact that you are making an impact negatively or positively is bad leadership. You can actually make people worse. You can hurt them. You cannot help them. You could put them in bad, like, worse places. A lack of motivation to me, and like lack of like finding a way to drive people, because not everyone's the same. Like, what drives one individual is absolutely not going to be what drives another, and you have to learn those relationships, and then you have to find what helps those people succeed. And the way I talk to one fielder or one squad leader is not the same as I talk to the other one, and that is just about building those relationships. And bad leaders never build those relationships, and they don't ever figure out how to care for their people.
So Bri, thinking about that, like, I 100% agree with you, and we talking from the human side of things, like they're doing the right thing for the right people, sometimes doing the right thing for the wrong people, just trying to help and have this like ethical and moral standard. But recently, in my experience in sports, I've been sort of like questioning myself what the good leadership is. I think what you described perfectly is like healthy leadership, but when we talk about team sports and we're talking about results, sometimes people go down the Machiavelli side of things, as in like, hey, I don't know how he does it or why he does it. People don't feel great around him. He might dispose of players, but he wins. You know, he gets championships. So people say he's a good leader. No, he leads the team to win. 100%, I would disagree with that. But if we were to think in a more like tangible or objective purpose of sport, which is not in college when you just try to teach people ways and not just to win at all costs, but you know, how do you see those types of leaders and the sort of leadership that gets mostly in pro sport, you know, where the values and the rules and the environment are completely different?
Yeah. And I think, and I want to make sure I'm understanding, but you're talking about a leader who people don't really like, but their team is successful,
Yeah.
and winning somehow, right? And
Yeah,
I
he's
think,
opposite to what you described. Like, he doesn't care if he says hello or not in the morning. Like, the tactics, or for some reason, sometimes I've been into environments and look around and I'm thinking like, how is this working? As in working, as in like the team performs or doesn't perform. Like, people are not happy as on the human level. Like, no one's treated like they want to be treated, but it just works. And sometimes players end up like sort of wanting and needing that. Like, we need someone who comes in and says, you know, does the tough things and the whatever thing. We don't like him, but we're winning, and we all want to win because players, especially the pros, they shine from the wins. You know, like no one's going to say, you know what, you played great, you're great human beings, but you lost, and the supporters will still like pat you in the back. You know, they'll still insult you, like they throw stuff at you, like, you know, throw stuff at your car. Like, no one cares how you do it. Just whatever happens is what's important. You know.
yeah. And I think there's a lot of different ways to approach that question. I think one of the things that and like I talked about in the beginning about how, you know, when you first get into coaching and you're young, you want to be liked more, almost more than, you know, you want to be hard about your standards. And I think the older you get and the more you get into this profession, you realize that the standards create your culture. And I think, most of those situations where the leader is very poorly liked, but the team is successful, I believe that there's probably a lot of other people affecting that team in a very positive way. Because again, like the culture is the most important thing, I think, in a team's success. And the leader might be bad and they might play a role in that culture. Like they might not be liked, but they're playing a role somewhere over here. And then you have the team whose morale is building on the fact that they all feel the same, right? And the culture is building. And so there are other people influencing that, the strength coaches, the athletic trainers, the whatever it might be, who are holding that team afloat, right? And they're all corralling around the fact that they want something really bad together. If the team is together, that is really what you need most. And I think you can have leaders that are not liked, who are hard about standards, who feel a certain way, who are, you know, maybe they're the target or whatever the case is, but if the team can fuel themselves off of that, then I don't think it will last forever. When you talk about winning cultures, you talk about UConn women's basketball, like long periods of time, like where the culture stays high, that's not a bad leader who just the team's morale is, you know, fired around. But when cultures start to change or you get a big shift in culture, the team might just be moraling around the fact that like that's not who we want to follow, but we do care about each other. And caring about each other and caring about the people is really where you're going to find that big change. And that's just speculation on my end in terms of like where I have seen a lot of good and bad.
No. For like the
bad
people
leaders.
listening, like we've never met before. We've never talked about my former job. So you just genuinely 100% described a place I used to be in. And it's basically the guys were like, we don't like him. He's going to be here forever because he knows whoever, but this is our dream. So it's sort of like we need to learn how to, you know, get along or do whatever we can. And they had like these like rounds where they're just talking about like, doesn't matter what he said. So they weren't always like fighting against it. They just learned that it was part of like, you know, one of the hurdles that was part of their dream. So they goes, well, just see the positive sides of him. When he shows up the bad sides, we just know what it is. Stay united as a group, you know, whatever. Like, but it's exactly, you were describing everyone. I'm like, have we met before? Like, have I told you what some of my former jobs were? But it's exactly, I like to believe that, you know, maybe from my ego perspective, but that I was one of those people saying like, you know, just don't blame it on anyone else. Even if he's like such and such, you can't really blame your lack of, or you giving up on someone else. That's just an excuse. So there's levels, but you know, some of the guys have moved on and like done different things and like all based on the culture they used to have, you know, doors in. So yeah, that's a great answer. It just made me think about my former jobs. Like, geez, right, it was like that. That's what happened.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think there's too many poor leaders in positions they shouldn't be, and you see it a lot more often than not. But you'll just see teams start to fuel, like it's almost a motivation factor. You know, they fuel their fire off of this poor leader that they realize doesn't care necessarily about their individual success, and they just kind of get fired up around that. And I've seen that a couple times, unfortunately.
That sounds like the plot to the movie fucking Major League, no? Like the fucking team rallies around each other, like fuck that, right? Like, sorry for everybody still listening to us. Yes, there was we did just talk about the fucking movie Major League with Charlie Sheen. All right, switching gears to the tactical world. You talked about H2F and you're fucking in it. Like we've got two coaches. First of all, as we talked, we had two coaches on. They're both on the West Coast. They're working at similar bases. We have a ton of members on the forum talking about tactical world, and Fort Bragg has both Justin and Tall Alex had said nothing but positive things about Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg in our members forum that I've, you know, been active in gets nothing but like fucking rave reviews. So what's the secret in the sauce? As we just talked about leadership. Do you guys have the best fucking leaders? Like, what is it?
We do. And I will tell you that anytime anyone gets stationed at Fort Bragg, like what you're going to hear is like, oh, so you got to drink the Kool-Aid. Because if you go to the 82nd, you have to be bought into the 82nd. It's part of the culture. So it's just like a rite of passage. You go through an AIC course, which is like, it's like an airborne refresher course. And part of the course is like learning the history of the 82nd and just realizing that you are at one of the greatest places in the world. And every leader there will tell you that. And I think in any world, you know, there are struggles for sure, but I will tell you, I think I tell everybody when they ask me like, oh, how do you like being at the 82nd? I'm like, personally, I really, because, you know, some people are like, oh, you know, it's so, you got to be so hua and so army to be at the 82nd. And I'm like, I love it. I would rather be around a bunch of people who want to be where they're at than be around a bunch of people who are miserable to be where they are. So I love the motivation. I love the tempo. It has so much tradition. And I think when we go back to talking about culture, the 82nd does an incredible job of hanging on to their culture and hanging on to their history and like creating buy-in. And I appreciate that very much. So they like to stay true to who they are, and they take a lot of pride in the fact that we are the 82nd Airborne. And then I think going into the H2F thing, I think it has definitely, for old army people, it used to be, you know, your platoon sergeant and your squad leaders kind of creating PT plans without any, like we talked about, like you're, as a strength and conditioning coach, like your genius is how to get people to be better athletes and injury prevention and like getting them better for the long term, like longevity, right? And we were allowing people to just, who had no background in that, just create physical fitness plans. And so me, I'm like, yes, I am bought into H2F. Like we have these people who have this background and are qualified, and it's the struggle right now. I think that we see as leaders with the implementation process is our and this is infantry specifically, but when you write a strength conditioning program, like it's a program that's written over time, and you know when the games are, when the practices are, what your high tempo, low tempo days are, you know, you have it all planned out. In the infantry, it's like, we're going to go to the field for 2 weeks, or we're going to be at the ranges for the next 3 days, and we're probably not going to sleep any. And then you talk about recovery. And so that's been the hard part. But I will say that we are doing, as a division, like a much better job of trying to create that long-term plan so that we can do a better job of like implementing something that is impactful and that you can actually see progression on. So I have a great relationship with I have a strength coach that works with us specifically. And actually, we just got Team Builder.
Fucking right, you did. We love Team Builder here.
Yeah, we did. He's like, oh, ma'am, have you ever used Team Builder? And I was like, yes. And I was like, I love Team Builder. And he's like, I want to use your platoon. And he's like, as H2F, we want to start implementing Team Builder into the platoons so that we can have that long-term program and get these guys on a program. And that way, on days that like the weekends or days that like we are not all together, these guys still have something to follow. And the biggest thing is the coaching aspect, right? Because we have all these tactical athletes who don't know how to properly do anything, but Team Builder lets you use that like video piece, right? Where you can actually like watch the video, and then also you can record your individual data, and it'll kind of show you what you need to be doing for that next step. So big fan, and we just got it last week, and all my guys are on it now, so I'm really where that takes us.
Damn right. For that, and again, I'm not asking you to talk about the coaches at Fort Bragg. I'm asking you from a 10,000-foot view, as if you're the commander of the military. What would be your recommendation to any tactical strength and conditioning coaches? Like, hey, this is how you can break through this is how it's always been done, or this is like, how could you've seen it from athlete to coach, and then coach working with your strength coach, like the different levels of buy-in, like you said, whether you have a lot of athletes or few, like you see it all from a really good detached point of view, I think. What would you say to our listeners that are in the tactical world? Like, hey, this is in my opinion, this is how you can get through and best work with and do your best service for the athletes you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good question. I think what like how to bridge that gap. So, and I know, and this is me personally, because I am a big fan of wanting to implement more of our H2F, but I told my strength conditioning coach specifically, I'm like, hey, you need to come on a ruck with us. Like, you need to throw a ruck on your back. You need to know what that feels like. And he was like, all right, let's do it. Like, I'm in, because there's a big difference between a college athlete and a tactical athlete. And like, there's field endurance. And for us, the field is being in the woods, and like just genuine, like college athlete endurance. And I think I think to get the guys, the squad leaders, the team leaders, the Joes, to get them to be like, this guy knows how to impact my performance. For me, I'm like, he's gonna get out there and do it with us, and he's gonna understand what it feels like. Because if he shows up on our morning rucks, then these guys are gonna better understand, like, okay, he knows what it feels like. And so when he says, hey, this is going to give you better ruck times, this is going to pay off in the long run, this is how we build that field endurance, they're going to be like, all right, well, this guy knows what it feels like to be under a ruck for 48 hours. This guy knows what it feels like to be walking around in the woods under load. And like, we don't carry we don't pick up barbells, and we don't carry like kettlebells. Like, we literally carry litters, and like we carry bodies like over our shoulders, like all the stuff that we're carrying, and like ammo cans. Like, it's not comfortable, and it's not like transitional to necessarily all the stuff. For me, I can understand in my brain like why the things we do in the weight room would transition to what we're doing in the field. But for somebody who doesn't have the weight room familiarity, like, it is challenging for them to be like, how is this going to make me better at carrying ammo cans? And or like, how is this going to make me better at buddy carries when I'm getting smoked and have to carry this guy like 500 meters, And so I think that part is important too, is like, everything we do in the field is so, like, when we do like a tactical workout, it's like we put our kit on and we're carrying people, and we're carrying ammo cans, and we are carrying rucksacks and litters, and we're loading the litters with a bunch of equipment. And so it's like never looks the same as the weight room. So trying to help them understand, how those tie together is really important.
Very well said. Fuck, I got no, like, shit, I don't know shit about it. So yeah, if I ever get into the tactical world, I'm gonna fucking call you and be like, hey, what do I need to do? I'll wrap it up here with a couple other questions that I got, but one of the sayings that I've kind of latched onto and kind of different things is, there's no such thing as bad teams, only bad leaders. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think as a leader, it's your job to, like, how well, or how at the end of, they always say, like, when you're the platoon leader, at the end of the day, like, how good or bad your platoon is, or everything your platoon does or fails to do is on you. Like, and when you're on a team, like, there's a coach for a reason, there's a leader for a reason. And so I believe it is your job to impact change. And you can take the worst group of human beings and you can make them successful with the right leadership and the right culture. I feel very strongly about that. And I think even to like, when I first got my platoon, we were like not in a great place. And I think in like just this past, it was just like, we didn't have like a great culture in my platoon. And just this past 2 weeks ago, we ended up going out and executing like this, it's called platoon exevals, but it's like a mission. I don't really know how to explain it in lesser terms than that. And we ended up ranking first out of all the other platoons. And to see them come from the bottom, because we were probably the worst platoon in my battalion, and to see them come from the bottom and work and get to the top was one of the coolest transitions for me as a leader. So I what you said is exactly right. There aren't bad teams. Like, the team is not bad. If the team fails, it is because the leader has failed them, in my opinion. So.
Amen. Second question, or another second saying, I would say, is, and again, tell me your thoughts on it from your perspective as a leader, that we are all leaders. You're either effective or ineffective as a leader.
I believe that I think that's true. I think that's accurate, and I think ineffective would be like I had talked about. You're either making an impact or you're not, and that's whether you're in charge of a team or you're passing somebody in the park. But like every single day, you have a decision to positively or negatively impact those around you by what you bring to the table and how you carry yourself. You should be somebody that people want to emulate, and again, I go back to the word integrity, but like I feel super strongly about that, and like it's how you represent your morals and values and how that makes an impression on a stranger and on the people you're around every day. So I believe if we are not striving to be better, or we are not striving for more in our own individual lives, like then what are we doing? You know, like where are we going, and why don't we want more for ourselves? So I believe in constant growth, which sounds super exhausting, but I don't know, it just fires me up.
All right, so with that on
So-
constant growth and possibly exhausting, I'll leave you on this last question of your thought on one of my favorite saying, right, is discipline equals freedom. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could not agree with the statement more. I believe that we are always going to want certain things, and we either talk about wanting those things or we make actionables toward getting those things. And the more true you are to your actionables and the more you show up for yourself, the happier you're going to be in the end. Like you want to lose weight but you still sit on the couch every day and you eat potato chips and you don't exercise, like it's just a want. There's no action toward that, and you are not free because you're constantly thinking about the things that you want and you're unhappy. If you make actions and you stay true to those actions, you wake up at the same time every day, you drink the same amount of water, you show up for yourself every single day, you are happy, and you wake up and go to bed every night knowing that you respect the person that you are. And I feel strongly about that. So that's freedom to me.
Mic drop. So typically at this point, we have people plug their social because they're still in the game of coaching, and say, hey, like this is your opportunity to talk about something that maybe we didn't talk about. So for all of our listeners that made it this far, we appreciate you. If there, again, something that you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about, or something that you again want to follow you on your journey as a an officer at Fort Bragg, this is your opportunity to mention any of that.
I will just say, like, my last piece of advice is always go after what you want. I think there's way too many people that are afraid to do things and think that they see people on Instagram or people, they read about other people's stories and they're just like, oh, I could never do that. And I think even for myself, like when I first thought about going to Ranger School, I was like, yeah, I don't know that I even have the ability to do that. But go after it. I think you will always surprise yourself. And I think any human being is capable of achieving any goal as long as they are determined and want it bad enough. So never, ever sell yourself short. Invest in yourself and use the people around you. There's way too many resources today for there should be zero excuses for staying in the same place that you are right now. There's just way too many resources, way too many networks. So go after what you want, make a plan, make it happen. And obviously, if anybody wants to reach out to me, you're more than welcome to. My email is BRISTRECKER @gmail. Or I have an Instagram account. It is BR4EZY21, I think. But you're welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I appreciate you having me on. This was really fun. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. And have a good rest of your day.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.